November 1981. The largest land army ever assembled in peacetime is pointed at a 40-kilometer gap in the hills of central West Germany. Soviet forces, 41 divisions, 53,000 tanks, over 1 million men forward deployed across Eastern Europe. NATO, 16 nations, 26 divisions, outgunned and outnumbered at every point of contact along the inner German border. NATO planners have run the numbers. Conventional ammunition runs out in 14 days. After that, the doctrine has one answer. 40 million people will die in the first 2 weeks of nuclear exchange. The tankers of the 8th Guards Army have been told they will reach the Rhine in 72 hours. They know it is cold. They know their tanks smell of diesel and rust. They know the political officers have been speaking more quietly than usual for the past 3 days. Some of them believe it. None of them know they are about to fight a war their army was not built to survive. It is a 40-kilometer corridor of low hills and river valleys, running from the East German border toward Frankfurt. Frankfurt is the logistics hub of NATO's entire Central European defense. Take Frankfurt, and the alliance fractures at its spine. Soviet war planners have known this since 1955. They have spent 26 years building an army specifically shaped to pour through this gap faster than NATO can seal it. The man who designed that army is Marshal Nikolai Ogarkov. He is not a Cold War bureaucrat collecting medals in Moscow. He is the officer who looked at NATO's doctrine, identified its single critical weakness, reaction time, and built an entire military architecture around exploiting it. His creation is the Operational Maneuver Group doctrine. Not a frontal assault, a deep penetration. Fast-moving armored columns, bypassing NATO strongpoints, driving for logistics nodes, command centers, and bridge crossings before reserves can be committed. By the time NATO understands where the main effort is, it is already 200 kilometers behind the front line. He knows American air power is decisive. He knows American logistics are extraordinary. He knows that if NATO has time to organize, time to coordinate, time to bring its full technological weight to bear, the Soviet numerical advantage erodes. 800 surface-to-air missile batteries along the forward line. 4 air armies with over 4,000 combat aircraft. 1 tank for every 2 meters of the inner German border. The wall of steel Ogarkov has assembled is not designed to win a fair fight. It is designed to make a fair fight impossible. Now NATO responds differently. Each F-35A of the 48th Fighter Wing at RAF Lakenheath carries no external weapons. No pylons, no drop tanks visible from the outside. From the front, it looks like a shaped absence, a geometry designed not to exist on radar. Its radar cross-section is approximately 0.001 square meters. A Soviet SA-10 battery tracking a conventional aircraft sees a return the size of a fighter jet. Tracking an F-35A, it sees something closer to a large bird. Except birds do not fly at 1.6 Mach at 10,000 meters. NATO enters the battle with approximately 400 JASSM-ER missiles staged across European theater air bases. Each missile is 1.04 meters in diameter, 4.3 meters long, and carries a warhead of 453 kilograms of high explosive. Its range is 970 kilometers. Its radar cross-section is smaller than the F-35A carrying it. It navigates via GPS, inertial guidance, and a terminal infrared seeker that compares what it sees to a stored image of the target. It does not need to be told twice. It does not miss by more than 3 meters. 400 missiles against 800 Soviet air defense batteries. Every missile must count. There is no reserve. There is no second magazine. NATO's entire precision strike inventory for the opening phase fits inside a number a battalion commander could write on a note card. The E-7 Wedgetail airborne early warning aircraft, orbiting over the North Sea, simultaneously tracks 180 targets. It does not participate in the battle directly. It sees the battle in its entirety. Every Soviet radar emission, every gap in the surface-to-air missile coverage, and translates that picture into targeting data flowing to F-35As 200 kilometers away. Soviet command architecture moves information vertically, from unit to brigade to army to front. The E-7 moves information horizontally, instantly, to every aircraft in the network simultaneously. NATO's 400 missiles will be allocated with a precision the Soviet side cannot match and cannot replicate. What the Soviet side cannot conceptualize is not the missile, it is the absence. Their air defense doctrine is built around detection, tracking, and engagement. Every step assumes the enemy announces itself, with a radar return, with an engine emission, with a flight profile that fits known categories. The JASSM-ER does none of these things. It flies below Soviet search radar coverage, produces no meaningful return, and arrives at the battery site without a single prior indication. The SA-10 operators are not slow. They are not poorly trained. They are operating a system built to fight a different war. Across the border, Marshal Ogarkov has built something that precision strike cannot simply erase. The 8th Guards Army alone fields 2,100 tanks. The 3rd Shock Army adds another 1,800. Behind them, in 2nd and 3rd echelon, are formations that exist specifically to replace whatever the 1st echelon loses. Soviet doctrine does not assume the 1st echelon survives. It assumes the 2nd echelon continues. The 3rd echelon continues after that. It is not a machine that breaks when you shoot the front of it. It is a conveyor belt. You have to shoot the entire length of it simultaneously, or it keeps moving. The T-80 at the tip of each operational maneuver group column weighs 46 tons, carries a 125mm smoothbore gun, capable of defeating NATO tank armor at 2,000 meters, and moves at 70 kilometers per hour on a road. Inside the Fulda Gap, the roads run west. The crews have trained this route for years. Some of them can navigate it in the dark. At 0200, the Soviet Forward Air Defense Radar Network begins registering anomalies it cannot classify. Not contacts, not tracks, interference patterns at the edge of the detection envelope, lasting between 1 and 3 seconds before disappearing. The duty officer at 16th Air Army Headquarters logs the reports as equipment malfunction and files the paperwork. He does not wake his commanding general. At 0214, the first JASSM-ER salvo leaves the weapons bays of 8 F-35As, orbiting at 10,000 meters over the Hessian hills. The pilots do not see their targets. They do not need to. Each missile drops, ignites, and turns east. They fly at 500 meters above the terrain, below Soviet search radar coverage, navigating by the shape of the ground beneath them. The pilots turn west and begin the transit back to Lakenheath. Major Viktor Savchenko commands the 43rd Air Defense Battery, SA-10 complex, deployed in a tree line 6 kilometers northeast of Erfurt. He has been awake since midnight. His radar operator reported a brief anomaly at 0152, a return that lasted one sweep and vanished. Savchenko walked to the radar cabin himself, looked at the screen, saw nothing, and told the operator to log it and stay alert. Now it is 0318. The screen is clean. The radio net is quiet. He is drinking tea from a metal cup when the power cable to the radar trailer produces a single sharp signal, a voltage spike lasting less than 1/10 of a second, and the screen goes dark. He sits for a moment in the sudden silence. He picks up the handset, reports, power failure, cause unknown, requesting technical support. Across the net, 2 other battery commanders report the same thing within 40 seconds, then a 4th. Then silence from a 5th who does not report at all. Savchenko does not know that a 453-kilogram warhead has just detonated 11 meters from his generator truck. The blast pressure wave arrived before the sound. The sound arrives now. He decides it was ammunition cook-off from a vehicle fire somewhere to the east. He is already composing the technical failure report in his head. By dawn, 167 batteries have filed power failure reports. 11 have filed nothing. The first strike wave expended 91 missiles against the highest priority air defense nodes. The second wave, launched at 0400, expended 112 against the second tier. The third wave, at 0600, burned through 163 more against armor concentrations and command relays. 400 missiles entered the battle. 27 remain. Ogarkov receives the consolidated report at 0600. He looks at the map for 90 seconds. 167 silent batteries in a pattern running the entire length of the forward defense zone. No aircraft tracked, no missiles detected, no warning time on any engagement. He does not ask how. He understands what the pattern means before his staff finishes briefing it. The question is not how to defeat the invisible attacker. The question is how to reduce the time his forces spend exposed to it. At 0612, Ogarkov issues the order to General Petrov, commanding the 3rd Shock Army. Compress column spacing from 20 kilometers between echelons to 5. The order goes against standard doctrine. Compressed columns are more vulnerable to a single strike. Ogarkov knows this. He issues the order anyway. A column spaced 20 kilometers apart spends 4 times as long in the engagement envelope as a column spaced 5 kilometers apart. More casualties per strike. But the column reaches its objective before the next strike cycle can be coordinated. Ogarkov is not trying to avoid being hit. He is trying to be hit fewer times total. It is the correct decision. It will not save the Third Shock Army. It will save its momentum. By 0900, the first operational maneuver group columns are crossing the inner German border at 4 points along a 90-kilometer front. NATO forward observation posts report contact 40 seconds after the first tank crosses the wire. The columns are moving at 45 kilometers per hour. In 40 seconds, each column has moved 500 meters into West Germany. At 1400 on the second day, Steiner's chief of staff places a single sheet of paper on the operations table. It contains one number, 27. That is, the remaining JASSM-ER inventory across the entire European theater. Not 27 batteries, not 27 strike packages, 27 individual missiles. Steiner looks at the map. 3 operational maneuver group spearheads are still moving. The northernmost column has crossed the Werra at Honeberg and is 40 kilometers west of the start line. At its current rate of advance, it reaches the outskirts of Kassel in 11 hours. Kassel is a road and rail junction that feeds the entire northern NATO defense. Lose Kassel, and the 3rd German Corps defending the northern flank loses its supply line within 72 hours. Steiner expends 24 of the remaining 27 missiles on the Honeberg column. The lead brigade loses 140 tanks in 31 minutes. It stops. The 2 following brigades do not stop. They are 5 kilometers behind the lead, close enough to see the fires, far enough to survive them. At 1600, the 3rd Brigade finds a logging road north of Honeberg that does not appear on the NATO map. It has been on the Soviet map since 1973. Steiner uses his remaining 3 missiles on the logging road column. The column slows. It does not stop. At 0300 on the 3rd day, its fuel trucks, rerouted after Apache strikes destroyed the Honeberg supply route, find the column 12 kilometers east of Kaufungen. The column is stationary for 4 hours. 4 hours is enough for 2 NATO Leopard 2 battalions to dig in across the Kaufungen road. The column does not break through them. It does not need to. It fixes them in place while the 2nd and 3rd OMG echelons cross the Werra 40 kilometers to the south and begin moving northwest toward Kassel from a direction the Leopard battalions cannot cover. Kassel falls at 1400 on day 4. Kassel falls not to a brilliant maneuver, to arithmetic. 3 echelons, sequenced by a doctrine built specifically for this. Absorb the precision strike on the 1st echelon, continue with the 2nd, fix the defender with the 3rd. The compression order Ogarkov issued at 0600 on day 1 placed the 2nd and 3rd echelons exactly where they needed to be when the 1st stopped burning. He designed this before a single tank crossed the border. It worked exactly as designed. The numbers require a moment before analysis. Soviet armored losses over 4 days. Between 8 and 12,000 tanks destroyed or mission killed. The crews who died in those vehicles numbered between 36,000 and 48,000 men. These are losses that Soviet doctrine specifically planned for, budgeted for, and continued past. The 2nd echelon drove through the wreckage of the 1st because the doctrine told it to. The 3rd echelon drove through the wreckage of the 2nd for the same reason. NATO losses over the same period. Between 120 and 150 combat aircraft. Ground forces lost between 8 and 12,000 killed and wounded in the forward defense zone. At Herleshausen, a town of 4,200 people sitting on the only bridge capable of supporting T-80 traffic in the northern Fulda approach, a German territorial battalion held for 2 hours and 19 minutes, lost 211 of its 260 men, and destroyed 11 tanks before the 12th crossed anyway. Those 2 hours bought the demolition team enough time to detonate one of their 3 charges and slow the crossing by 40 minutes. In this battle, 40 minutes is a measurable thing. What the map shows on day 6, Soviet forces hold a strip of West German territory between 40 and 60 kilometers deep, running from Herleshausen in the north to Fulda in the south. NATO still controls the Rhine. Kassel is under Soviet administration. The Autobahn network feeding Frankfurt from the northeast is cut. The advance stops, not because NATO stops it, but because the Operational Maneuver Group doctrine was designed for a 72-hour deep penetration, not a sustained occupation. Fuel, ammunition, and track replacement parts for a force that has lost between 30 and 40% of its armor do not exist in the forward supply chain. The conveyor belt has run out of belt. What changed? NATO does not go nuclear on day 14. The precision strike inventory that destroyed 167 air defense batteries in 9 hours bought something worth more than tactical advantage. It bought 14 days of conventional war instead of 14 days before nuclear war. Both sides discover in those 14 days that the other side is not trying to end civilization. They are trying to win a war. That distinction, in November of 1981, is not obvious. Making it obvious is what 400 missiles actually purchased. On day 6, the first back-channel communication moves between Washington and Moscow through the Austrian Foreign Ministry in Vienna. Neither side calls it a peace negotiation. Both sides treat it as one. What did not change? The political architecture that made the war possible makes its continuation impossible. The inner German border existed before the war. It exists after it, moved 40 kilometers west in one sector. The war ends where wars like this always end. Not at the limit of weapons, at the limit of what both sides can explain to the people who will have to live with the explanation. The question underneath this battle is not whether modern NATO wins. It is whether precision can substitute for mass, or whether mass simply forces precision to become something it was never designed to be. JASSM-ER was designed for surgical strikes against hardened targets, command bunkers, air defense nodes, bridge crossings. One missile, one target, one result. It was not designed to be the entire conventional deterrent of a 16-nation alliance against 53,000 tanks. Assigned that role, it performs with extraordinary effectiveness and runs out in 48 hours. The weapon did not fail. The inventory failed. What modern technology specifically changed? 3 things, each named, each numbered. 167 Soviet air defense batteries destroyed in 9 hours, without a single NATO aircraft lost to air defense fire. In the historical scenario, suppressing Soviet air defenses over the Fulda Gap required between 200 and 250 combat sorties and produced losses of between 15 and 25% of the attacking force. In this scenario, that cost is 0. The pilots came home. In the historical scenario, between 30 and 60 of them would not have. The E-7 Wedgetail compressed the NATO decision cycle from 4 hours to 11 minutes. Against a force moving at 45 kilometers per hour, that gap is the difference between striking a column in open terrain and striking it inside a city. Those are not the same target. They are not the same war. The nuclear threshold. In the historical scenario, exhaustion of NATO conventional ammunition on day 14 triggers a nuclear release decision. Minimum estimated European casualties in the tactical nuclear exchange. NATO's own doctrine contemplated 40 million dead in the first 2 weeks. The modern conventional campaign produces between 20 and 30,000 dead over 6 days before negotiations begin. That gap is what 80 years of military development actually purchased. What technology did not change? The Fulda Gap is 40 kilometers wide because the Rhone Hills and the Vogelsberg Massif are where they are. The Soviet Union requires a land corridor to project force into Western Europe because it is a land power surrounded by land. NATO's deterrence depends on American commitment because the European members cannot individually match Soviet conventional mass. These are not technical problems. Ogarkov's doctrine reached Kassel not because it was unstoppable. It reached Kassel because it was designed to absorb precisely the kind of precision campaign NATO executed and continue past it. The compression order, issued at 0600 on day 1 by a man who had never seen an F-35A and had never heard of the E-7 Wedgetail, was deduced from 167 power failure reports before breakfast. That is not a failure of Soviet military thinking. That is Soviet military thinking at its most capable. The lesson is not that Ogarkov was defeated. The lesson is what it cost to defeat him, and what did not get defeated in the process. Now the human cost, stated plainly. 40 million dead in the historical scenario, between 20 and 30,000 in this one. Every precision-guided munition, every low observable aircraft, every networked sensor, All of it exists in service of that single arithmetic difference. Military progress is not measured in the battles it wins that would otherwise be lost. It is measured in the human cost it removes from battles that have to be fought, regardless, not dominance. The removal of 40 million names from a list that, in November of 1981, was already being written.